Livonian coast. We will come back again later on why it was so important geographically. But during the Second World War, again, during the Second World War, the same situation happened like during the First World War. It was Courland Peninsula was basically occupied by Nazi Germany at the time, and the Soviet Union regained control over the Estonian island of Saaremaa. So in the end of the Second World War, Livonian coast became again front line of that, which meant that Livonians were once again kicked out of their area, fearing the fact that there could be naval attack over the sea. And when Livonians somehow came back partially to the Livonian coast after the Second World War, however, many of them fled westwards with many other people of Latvia. And when they came back, the border area was declared in all the Soviet Union's western coast, including the Livonian coast, which meant that Livonians were not able to stay there to fish, and so they had to move out. So the border, it was a very heavily guarded place, and this led to the situation that Livonians were forced by lack of working opportunities out of their area. And this leads to today's situation where you have majority of the Livonian community residing in the capital city of Latvia, Riga, or the second density by density is Ventspils, which is the closest town to the Livonian coast, and then other places follow. So basically, if you go to the Livonian coast, you probably will not find any Livonians there because they are living elsewhere. However, during the Soviet time, even in this kind of exile situation that Livonian community suddenly found itself in, life continued, and also continued the safeguarding of the Livonian language and heritage. So in those who were Livonian cultural activists in 20s, 40s, they continued their work on afterwards as well. However, there were limited possibilities to gather, to come together. And in 60s, sometimes the Livonian community used birthday parties as one way of legally gathering people together. And during those birthday parties, what happened was that people were talking Livonian, were discussing Livonian subjects, but the next day the party moved to KGB headquarters because they somehow found out about these events and what were people talking there, etc., etc. So in 1972, Livonian community decided to legalize their efforts and established using the pre-course of the Constitution of the Soviet Union that guaranteed equal rights to all the nationalities. So using that pre-course, they founded two kind of singing groups or choruses, one in Riga and second one in Ventspils, respectively. They had the biggest Livonian communities in them. But these were quite unique in this landscape of music, because the ability to sing correctly and nicely was not the key parameter why people were taking on board for these singing groups. the main principle was belonging to the Livonian community and or supporting the Livonian community. So these chores that were created within this kind of a Soviet country were quite different and unique in that way. So, and they started to serve as a cultural center. So it was not only singing, there was a place for language acquisition, place for cultural exchange, place for development of new culture, new ideas, and also standardizing orthography and doing lots of different things. Basically, it also kind of started, or was the first step in such kind of um, folklore movement of Latvia, so traditional heritage, intangible heritage collection and spreading in general. So this was quite interesting that this came from such a community as Livonians that was quite small at that time. So in 1978 was another so-called Livonian uprising in a sense, because Livonians got erased from the list of nations of the Soviet Union. What this meant was that you could not anymore write down your nationality as Livonian in a passport. So, and there was a protest letter from Livonian intellectuals and Latvian intellectuals on board. That was sent to the party, Communist Party Central Committee in Latvia, opposing that decision and requesting continued writing of Livonian nationality in passports. So it ended, however, unfortunately, so without any result. But the same year, there was a plan of opening the first monument ever dedicated to Livonians in the Livonian coast. It's in the picture up left, and near the cemetery of Pisa, Western Livonian village, deep into in the border zone, so it's actually forbidden area. And despite that it was forbidden by the local KGB, Livonians managed to bring in four buses full of people, singers of the community, and many Latvian intellectuals, including poets. And they organized the poetry days and opening of the monument in this house. So this was kind of a great example of resistance to the Soviet Union system, performed by quite a small community, but yeah, still strong community. So after restoration of the independence of Latvia, so lots of things have changed. So the first thing was that Livonian Union, or this Livonian NGO, was re-established in 26th of November 1988. So bringing again together Livonians and their supporters. Next year, 1989, was actually 50 years anniversary of the Livonian National House in Ire, that Livonians managed to use for less than a year. So it's upper left picture. And for that day, it was the first time where many Livonians living abroad were able to get into the forbidden coastal zone, or coastal area. Also, many researchers from the West who were not allowed before into actual Livonian villages. So they gathered, everyone gathered together, and they had this 50 years anniversary celebration, which was huge. And it marked down the beginning of quite new tradition, which is the Livonian Festival. So the celebration itself was on the 6th of August, both in 1939 and 1989, 50 years later. But it was decided that on the first Saturday of August, was the 6th of August, 1989, so that on that day, on the first Saturday of August, there will be Livonian Festival held. And ever since, this has been taking place annually every year. Only one time it has been moved a week later, but people disagreed with that very strongly. So it was moved back, and it is kind of the year's main celebration, where you can first of all, where you can see all the different aspects of the Livonian intangible heritage today. But also, this is the place where the Livonian community is gathering together once in a year, and or trying to come together. So, and before that, since 1992, 1 week before or 10 days before, depending on financial situation, there is a children's and youth summer camp or summer school, as it is called today, where people aged 7 to 17, Livonian kids gathering together. So they have this one single opportunity that Livonians have to study the language, the culture, and practice the language and culture. So it has become this summer school has become an organic part of Livonian festival as well, because the kids studying there are taking part in performances throughout the Livonian festival. So as you can see here on both pictures that are down there, so the kids are singing at the opening and making also other performances like this picture in lower in the middle are involved. So and it is quite vibrant. So this also the Livonian, let's say, community's interest and efforts to keep their identity. So, as a nice example is, despite the seemingly small numbers of Livonian speakers and Livonian community, so every year in that summer school, 50 kids take place, and these are only those who have actually managed to get through the competition, because the place itself is not capable of taking in more kids. So you have to perform something to show your specific interest of taking part of that. So, and that is kind of a nice proof that that number 250 is definitely not adequate if speaking when speaking about the Livonian community. So there are also very many publications and active collection of and publishing Livonian intangible heritage. So including such a thing as contemporary Livonian culture. So this is something that makes Livonians outstand of many endangered nations in general, because Livonians are not that much locked into traditional culture and keeping intangible heritage, rather than creating new one. So, for example, the program at the Livonian Festival always includes 3, 4, 5 completely new things that for first time become public. You have 8 musical groups within that Livonian community, which is again by numbers quite small, and who perform very different kind of musical material. You have 3 poets writing poetry in Livonian, so even literary tradition is extending to quite contemporary times. And so we cannot speak about Livonians only in past tense and Livonian identity and efforts, but it is pretty much present and future tenses that should be used here, because it's really unproportionately vibrant and unproportionately active and visible also outside. So there are in the Livonian coast, however, there are places where you can see this Livonian intangible heritage. And although, as I mentioned, the majority, absolute majority of the Livonian community resides outside the Livonian coast, which is historical area. But there is just a couple of years ago, there opened a new public building. There's an exposition in Kuoka, which is currently the biggest village in the Livonian coast, developed after the Second World War because of the fishing abilities. And so there are some more things to come. So one important thing is just this February 20, there was a first sign opened in Livonian coast, which alongside the Latvian state language Latvian contains Livonian, as you can see in this picture, and this is only a pilot. So this is the first sign, but this summer it is thought that there will be a number of different signs, like village names, river names will be transferred to bilingual signs, including Livonian. So this is something that is common practice in Central Europe, in Northern Europe. There is a little bit new practice in Latvia, and it was quite a long way to getting these signs up. But now this is something that marks down, and if you happen to go to the Livonian coast, then probably already in this autumn you will be able to also not only know about Livonian former presence, but also see it written down in different roadsides. So now this year, maybe the freshest activities that are taking place this year is this efforts to acknowledge that Livonian heritage is not only connected with Northern Courland, with this western part, with the former Livonian area called Livonian coast, but it actually is connected with many places in Latvia where Livonians have lived, and in very different aspects, as a tangible heritage, as a hill forts, graveyards, some other remnants, but also as an intangible heritage, and usually under-researched, under acknowledged. But the effort that we here at the Institute also did was that we tried to promote, together with UNESCO, Latvia's National Commission, Livonian heritage, declaring this year as Livonian Heritage Year, and also organizing for the first time, and I hope that this tradition will stay on, the Livonian Heritage Day. So Livonian Heritage Day, the idea was by doing quite simple things, by doing either putting Livonian flag up or Livonian color, using Livonian colors for decorations for that one day. So the first Sunday after the spring solstice. And the second action was event of waking birds. So waking birds is tradition that I started to when I showed you those archaeological jewelry. So I pointed towards the sea water bird that comes from the old Finnic myth of this creation of the world. So in Finland Livonian case, this idea of water bird is transferred in a way that there is this tradition of waking birds, and which takes place every spring when there is a spring solstice. And the idea is that the birds in this Courland Livonian perception, birds don't fly away. So birds stay during the winter under the ice or under the water, and then in the spring you have to wake them up with a special kind of song, which is simple. And the idea was that kind of unite this, and because the song goes with its roots back to very ancient times. to really this myth of Finnic people in common, then this is something that also is this myth is common for all these Livonian areas. So the result was surprising for us as well. So which showed the interest towards the Livonian heritage and towards like pointing out Livonian heritage. We and so it was decided that this Livonian Heritage Day will be like first Sunday after spring equinox, and together at that day there were more than 110 dots in a map, as you can see here. So green flags are not every place is visible. Green flags are the places where the Livonian flags were risen, like and Livonian colors were used, and those birds indicate places where there's birds waking of the birds were happening. The idea was really to kind of push people to feel to want to find more about their region, about their own Livonian roots, and maybe most impressive objects were the bridge over Gauja River in Sigulda. So it's a huge gorge, and they have this bridge with the flags. So for first time it was decorated alongside Latvian flags, also with Livonian flags. And these are still up. So if anyone happens to be around, so they will be taken down on 13th of April, just so they are still flying. So there were waking of birds across Riga. There was like this, for example, is from Livonian coast. There's OeAD-GmbH lighthouse in the Livonian colors, and many more. So it was quite an impressive event, and it really pointed out this Livonian heritage beyond Livonian coast. So now coming back to the Livonian coast, why this is important in the Livonian story, why this is important from the perspective that we today are here talking about Livonians, and especially about some new developments in Livonian history, is that what I pointed out is that Livonian coast is an island. So it doesn't look like an island on the map. It looks quite normally connected with inlands. However, it is an island geographically. So if you look by a satellite photo, you see those long lines running alongside the sea. And the geological history of this Livonian coast has been that there's a sea coming back. So there's the old sea coast, which is inlands inside. So here you can see this where the Schlitter as this like line goes. So this is old sea coast, so it's pretty high. And behind that is sea stepping back. And what you see here is a landscape of old dunes and valleys between them. So over the time, so those dunes, like you usually see at the sea coast. So there's this first dune that comes, and then the second dune, etc. Where the sandy is, sandy soil is, of course. Then those dunes were covered by the forest, and those gorges between them were filled with water and basically turned into swamp. So, and it formed the landscape of all the Livonian coast. It meant that two things. One thing is that travel inland is very complicated because you have to go cross all this dune and swamp landscape. So basically, if you want to move inland, it is really complicated. So you can move alongside the sea, like on the top of the dune, but it is hard to get inside. So it's easier to go on a boat over the sea. The second thing is that because of it's an old seabed, So these are basically dune landscape covered with forest, but it means that the soil is pure sand. And what that means is that you can have absolutely no agriculture in this area. So this is, first of all, it's isolated from inland. So you move over water to access up until very late times. You had to move over water to access Livonian coast primarily. And then the main income in the Livonian coast was fishing. So basically, you cannot grow anything. You can just grow some kind of first some small stuff that you would need for your family, but nothing that you can really produce. So no crop growing or something like that, because the land itself is pure sand. And it meant that it did two things. So it kept Livonians isolated on that island or island-like thing, and also made Livonians to have different lifestyle than the rest of the people in Courland. So for Livonians, it was fishing, and all the farming was for those inlanders. And there is also, it's reflected in how Livonians called themselves and Latvians. So most common is Randalist, which comes from word Rand, so coastal folk, Randali. And then Monika, it comes from word Mo, which means a land person, so one who works on land. Or the second option was Kalamieds or a fisherman, and Moamieds, again, those who deal with agriculture. And that was also the kind of self-nomination for Livonians and Latvians, and keeping addressing the different. So it might like from the satellite, if you look, so you can see clearly these stripes. So in a wilderness, it might not look that scary, but it is. So this is, for example, this is one stretch between two dunes. So this is the swampy area. So this can run for tens of kilometers. This kind of a long swamp, which is, I mean, it has like this particular landscape it's quite unique for the Baltic Sea in general. So it has, even in Latvian, it has borrowed this Livonian names of the landscape. So the dune is Kangar, which means the long hill, also in other parts of Latvia. So this is one indicator that's specific for Livonian language. And then Viga, which is this deeper place, and sometimes even a lake can be formed. So here is also, so this is basically one part of the stripe that has become a complete lake. And well, this is when this is how Livonian coast looks from a top. So first you see this, like there is this solid soil or older seabed, and then you can see those stripes coming, and then between the stripes you can see. So these are actually two village places. This is Ire on the left and Kostreg on the right. So this is how they look from the LIDAR, which shows geographical forms without vegetation and artificial objects removed. So, and how all these villages in the Livonian coast, how they developed, and here you can clearly see a proof of that. So there were, first of all, there was wind blowing sand more or less evenly, so creating kind of fields instead of this landscape of dunes and swamps. And then when people settled on it, they started to clean the land, make the irrigation, so make it more suitable for living. Stop the dunes from moving, because when wind blew, so it meant that those dunes were actually changing places. And here you can see precisely how does it develop. If you go on the actual landscape and you look at how does it, and you just look around without knowing the background of it, so it might seem like quite a normal village. But the history of the creation of the life in this Livonian coast itself, so it's you have to acknowledge that it's basically to make living there, you had to do everything artificial. So it's hundreds and hundreds of years that people have contributed to creating at least some possibilities to live there. And because of that, it's probably more Livonian coast were also used as a hideout for Livonians from Courland in general, because it's not the nicest place to live there, definitely. So it is very very attached to the sea. It had quite a poor conditions for performing anything else. But at the same time, this isolation from inland, isolation from the contacts of and isolation also lifestyle-wise is something that has greatly contributed for the Courland Livonians to be to stay for so long and take it to the today. So if we look at the map, so all these roads that connected here and the roads that leading into villages. So one thing has to be kept in mind. So these are new roads. This big red road was built in 1953 as a support road for border guards and strategic purposes, and also those roads leading into villages are new roads. The old roads went in the woods. Some remnants are still there, and they led parallel to the sea. Like there are some places that you can really trace them and drive them. So and here you can see that those roads that are leading, so they're just cutting directly through the actual landscape. Livonian coast itself, however, is known for a very long time. It is the old Kolka Cape, which is this very place, the tip of Courland Peninsula, is very well known. From the ancient times, it's the first place mentioned, place in Latvia mentioned in the written sources, in Swedish routes that tell about traveling around this Kolka Cape. So why it is important? Because the sand dune continues under the water for about 6 to 7 kilometers. And moves instantly because this is the place where the open sea and the Riga Gulf meet. And so it makes it extremely dangerous for navigation. And it is thought that is one of the biggest ship cemeteries in Baltic Sea is just around the Kolka Cape. And it was like from navigational purposes, it was extremely important. Known for a very long time, and time to time you can find in Kolka Cape so these remnants of old ships buried by this moving sand dune carried out. So there were first lighthouses were built on Kolka Cape quite a long time ago in medieval times. So there are 2 lighthouses that are not currently visible anymore because one is already underwater and second is becoming underwater. And then in 19th century, there was an island built at the top, at the end of the sand dune in the sea, artificial island that finally solved the navigational issue. And here you can see how the Kolka Cape looks from above. And it really is kind of a unique place because there can be storm on one side and complete calm on the other side, because these are really 2 seas that are meeting. And for Livonians, so this is like Livonian has this denomination of Baltics, which is a big sea, Surmer, and the Riga Gulf, which is small sea, or Pishkimer. And these are really two seas coming together very precisely. So this is about how Livonian coast looks like. So it really is like a Livonian flag, green, white, and blue. So it's how the life looks like, and the life itself, as I said, was very closely connected with the sea. With things that you can do with the sea, and how you can use something that sea may offer you. So the fish is a complete basis of everything, fish and fishing, and this is also the thing that why 20th century changed so lot for Livonians, because again, for a very long time, Livonian coast remained isolated from the rest of the country. So it remained like a peripheral island that nobody really cared about. It was like some just 14 fishermen villages, and those people whose only thing that you could get from them was really just fish and nothing more. And then it was peripheral all the time. And then, however, in 20th century, it suddenly became important. So it became a front line, and during the First World War. It became front line during the Second World War. It became a borderline afterwards under the Soviet occupation. And because of that specific geographical position of the Livonian coast, it was easy to remove people from there. So it was in the First World War. So if you order people to move away 12 miles, it just didn't mean 12 miles. It meant actually much more, because there is a belt of uninhabitable land between Livonian villages and the inland. So it's basically it's just like removing an island, and you can easily empty it out. And that was also the reason why it was so devastating, this border area, when it was introduced, because it was, of course, introduced for all the western coast of the Soviet Union, including Estonian islands, Lithuania, other places in Latvia, but it was devastating for Livonian coast because the key thing was that all the sea traffic, all the boat owning, was forbidden. So it meant that basically, if you want to live, if you want to earn living in the Livonian coast, there was one key option, and that was fishing. So if that is forbidden, then basically you can not really do anything. And what happened in other places was that if you live at the sea coast and you're not able to go to the sea fishing, you can turn around and start doing some agriculture, like other places in Latvia. So you can basically stay in your village. Well, you change your employment, so you don't fish anymore, and then you just take a tractor and go to the field. In Livonian coast, it was impossible. So if you can't fish, right away it meant that you just leave for other and start a new life elsewhere. And this is what happened to the Livonian community. So this is and this has been kind of a traumatizing experience for community itself, also for the language transition, and then for many other things. So it's basically in 50s, if you were Livonian, so then you had to remove from the Livonian coast, then settle a new life somewhere else, and then have to make these decisions like what to do about the future, and which is already, so taking into account a small amount of community. And then now, in addition to small amount of the community, you have also scarcity of the community, so it is scarce across the Latvia without real abilities to kind of communicate, come together, to do something, and this also explains why this in 70s these legalization actions were performed, so to get kind of a reboost in the new kind of a new world, get reboosting action. So now coming back to sea life, of course, like everything was pretty much, and for some people it's still connected with the sea, with fishing, with smoking fish, preparing, and even in 19th century. So first those drawings from the Livonian coast, they show this these all the sea connected things, and of course the sea coast itself looked very different when there were people. So if we compare those 14 villages in 19th century, so it was 2,500, 3,000 inhabitants in that area. So, and every village looked very, very different. So today, if we look at the open sea during the winter time, then in those 10 villages which are located towards open sea, 9. So you have around 100 people living, and it's about 70 kilometers long stretch, and you have around 100 people living. Out of them, 70 live in one village, another 30 live in the rest of it. So it is really, really empty space. It has never recovered after that hit it took during the Soviet times. And where today you'll see like empty beaches for the tens of kilometers, there was barely anyone walking there. Then it looked very different before 50s. Like here are some. These are pictures from 30s where you can see there's those houses for boats, places for drying nets, many boats prepared to go fishing. Sea mud is collected, and this is also some kind of interesting thing about livelihood in the Livonian coast, because the sea was not only a source of food and source of living, but it was also a source of agriculture. For example, if you wanted to land to be at least the sand to be at least a little bit fertile, so what you did in Livonian coast, you collected sea mud and then used it as a fertilizer on agricultural lands, and also you used uh, seashells to feed to the chicken, and still up until today. So because again, so you use everything that's at your disposal. So that living was really looked really different, and also landscape was pretty different. So now it's more covered with woods and stuff. But then again, coming back to this expulsion time actually killed, if we can say so, killed Western Livonian as a dialect, as the speakers, because when people came back, the western part of you remember that I told so, which is on the west from Ira River. So it was burned down during the First World War. So not only people kicked out, but it was also completely burned down, leaving only a couple of stone buildings. But all the wooden buildings were burned down, except of one, and that one is currently located in Latvia's National Museum of Ethnography in Riga. It was transferred there. There's only Western Livonian building standing nowadays, and the people had to live in pretty bad conditions, so they didn't care that much about the Livonian heritage and language aspects. So they cared much more about rebuilding their life and struggling with social problems. So this is why Western Livonians was language transition in West stopped earlier, already in 30s, because they had completely different priorities, and this is also why Eastern Livonian has become also, especially in newer times, is a main base of literary Livonian as well. So there, in Soviet times, coming to the Livonian coast was very complicated. So it was similar like going abroad. So basically, you had to have a relative or some other specific reason to visit the Livonian coast, like a scientific expedition would do. And then you had to get a license. So you had to kind of visa-like document, like this one showed here, which explains what are you going to do there. And then when you went to the Livonian coast, there were at least 2 or 3 checkpoints where you had to show this document along with your passport when you enter this area. So, and also how this Soviet system looked like in this Livonian coast was that there's border guarding. And later in 80s, it became easier, but in 60s, 70s, so there was you couldn't get to the sea coast at all. So there are 2 places in all the Livonian coast towards the open sea, where during the summertime, during daylight hours, you were able, like 300 meters of place at the sea coast where you could go there, and usually there was a watchtower, border guard watchtower that kept close eye to what's happening there. And like I was told by former Livonian, so in her village was the most terrible experience that there's a barbed wire in the front as well. So and barbed wire was not on the beach, but before on the dunes already. So well, what was on the Livonian coast, you could like kind of hear the sea that is just 100 meters away, but you cannot have visual contact with the sea because there's barbed wire and you're not allowed even near the coast. So again, on the other side of that village stretch where those dunes started and those swampy areas. So using the fact that people went away from this Livonian coast and the nature was very unique. So there was a national reserve that started to expand, and one moment reached its area so wide that people were not able to cross the main road, newly built road that runs alongside the coast, even for going to pick berries or something, because it was forbidden to enter to the woods to protect nature. So it was like the people were living in some 1.5 kilometers stretch of land between barbed wire on one side and nature to be protected on the other side. So it was quite depressive landscape, and especially, and of course also partially fishing equipment was gradually destroyed, like you can see on these pictures. So what happened also in the western part mainly was that when in the eastern part this natural reserve was expanding, then in the western part Soviet military was expanding, and it had many different kind of military bases in this western part. There was anti-aircraft systems, there was a tank polygons, border guards, and the most secretive object of the Soviet Union in the area of Latvia was this radio telescope, which is in Livonian coast and which is like the 8th biggest dish in the world and second biggest in Europe, so in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of woods. And it was used for space spying on satellites and reading satellite data, military satellite data. So today it's used as a radio telescope. By the way, also Estonian first satellite was guided with this radio telescope when it flew to the space. And so the presence of military was very heavy, and especially because it was so empty land in the 50s. So you had also coastal artillery, something similar that for those who have been in southern part of in Saaremaa, they know that there is these objects are perfectly visible and open to the general public. So, but the same kind of objects exist in the Livonian coast as well. So the only village from all those 14 villages that kept developing in the Soviet time was Kuolka village. So it was not biggest village before Second World War. It was quite a small, rather, but it was importantly located. So it was biggest of those villages located on the coast of Riga Gulf. And somehow in 60s, they made a collective farm there for fishing. And that served as a refuge for some Livonians who actually moved to Kuolka, to this village that today is the biggest one, with some 700 inhabitants in Kuolka currently, and they have quite a famous fishing factory in Latvia, and well, they developed the only village that actually developed during the Soviet times, and this is where this new exposition about Livonians, Livonian coast is located, and it's and there are shops and other institutions that normally village should have, but most of the Livonian villages do not have. However, this Livonian heritage you can really spot in different places around the Livonian coast. What happened also in 60s and 70s, kind of a positive development, I would say, was that when all these villages stayed empty. For example, Ira, which just on which is on the border, Latvian Lielera, which is on the border from between west and east. So it had more than 300 people living before Second World War, and currently there are 2 persons living throughout the year in that village. So the huge numbers of homes stayed empty. And what started to happen was, especially in 60s and 70s, and in 80s, people start to sell their homes, knowing or presuming they will never come back. And there was an action of organizing Latvian intellectuals to buy property in the Livonian coast, because there were ones who were kind of able to have money, time, and freedom of movement, in a sense to really inhabit those homes, and that tradition is somehow continued to the contemporary times. So you have quite an expensive land in the Livonian coast, but it's known because it's kind of peaceful, having no people, of course. And but it turns less peaceful in summer when there are more inhabitants, so-called summer dwellers, and who come to Livonian coast for a nice summer and then leave in the winter, switching lights in the village out. And but what it has done is that it has helped to preserve, because they mostly have very respectful attitude for the landscape and the homes that they have bought. And so the general landscape of the Livonian coast is kind of preserved. So in the upper left, you can see a new house built, which is completely replicates this traditional Livonian style. And then another thing that has now the recent developments in last years is that before, if you saw a Livonian flag flying, that you could assume right away, so that this is something that this particular home belongs to some Livonian who is like really kept his place. So now Livonian flag does not mean that the house is inhabited by the Livonians. So it means as a kind of this house is a part of the Livonian coast or this kind of belongs to indicates belonging to the Livonian heritage. That this is kind of symbol of this place of that we call Livonian coast and that we live in. So still in the Livonian coast, you can find some Livonians and also some who really keep the traditional intangible heritage, like this picture down below. There's a guy holding fish, and this is a Livonian from Pittsburgh who moved back in beginning of 90s to the Livonian coast where it was open again and starting to make fish. And he does it like kind of this Livonian semi-traditional way. Because traditional, there are two traditional ways how to prepare fish. One is like slow, fast smoking, which means that fish is edible for 4 days maybe. And the second is cold fishing, which takes like 2-3 days to do it on a very small fire, but you can keep fish for over the winter. So it dries them completely out. Now, this is very kind of something that is very characteristic to the Livonian food in general. And still these methods are kind of applied in this area. Well, then alongside with that, also some Livonian heritage lives on, as already mentioned, this tradition of Livonian of waking of birds. So here those pictures down, you can see how this tradition looks like. And it's usually done on the sea coast. And this is one time, so this one probably didn't mention. That's the time of the year when Livonians also decorate the trees with decorations, so that birds that return, they know where to come back. And also there is this Livonian costume making tradition. You can see so there are quite their own way. So speaking about sea and the daily livelihood is it has inflected or left its imprint on really ways how do Livonians have lived and what they have ate, and the food is maybe something that shows pretty well this connection to the sea though. So smoked, salted, fried fish, it's like the fish is the base of what you eat. And one very popular tradition for Livonians is that because there used to be lots of fish, but not enough meat. So when preparing food from the meat, which was quite general approach, was that you add fish to the meat, so to have an impression that there is more meat to have. So this combination where you put together fish with meat is very common, and also fish with milk products. Like for example, here's an example of cold soup, which is made with salted fish, which might seem terrible for some, but it's really tasty and great. And then there is like one quite well-known Livonian heritage, food heritage in Latvia, which is this carrot pie, which is known in Latvia as sklandrausis by its Latvian name, or dižrausis in very tip of northern Kurland. And for Livonian, surkak or big cake, it used to be mainly food for weddings. So this is a like open rye pie with carrot filling. So by the typology, it has its references to Finnish Karjalan piirakka or Karelian pie. It also has its references to the Finno-Ugric food tradition of open rye pies in Udmurt, Perepech, and others. So by the type itself of this food is is something that belongs to the Livonian heritage, and it can be noticed only in northern part of Courland and not south. And but the filling itself, so this carrot filling, this is something that is again very characteristic for Courland in general, so for the Courland population, and that is like local invention. And this is, by the way, one of the designated European heritage foods. So if you happen to see one, just buy and try. So you can become part of it. So again, we already talked a little bit about this Livonian heritage in place names, but also there are quite a lot of places, especially in northern Courland, that we still are able to collect their names in Livonian. We are not that lucky in other historical Livonian areas, because in other areas, so we have those Germanized or Latinized Livonian place names, and we are not able to really reconstruct, apart of some cases, original Livonian forms. But in Courland, that's quite opposite. So we currently have more than 1,200 Livonian place names in Livonian. So basically, if you go down to our resource page, which is livonian.tech, and maybe my colleague Milda can drop that into a chat. So this is that you can also find there a map, just zoomable map with Livonian coast and those different names of geographical objects that Livonian coast has. So, and another thing that I would like to recommend, if you have, especially during now this course that we are having, that if you happen to have some free time for binging, then there is a mini series that we made with the institutes when pandemic started. Initially, it was meant as a series for as a teaching aid for the schools who want to introduce kids with Livonian, both language and history, and maybe broader overview. And we ended up with kind of a series which offers like basics about Livonian, and also offers Livonian sounds sounds and some very basic information about Livonian pronunciation, etc. So I would, and these are seven. It's called 7 Livonian language lessons. It has both Latvian, Livonian, and also English version, although English version is not dubbed but only subtitled. But nevertheless, it's worth maybe binging through. So there's 7 lessons, and each lesson is approximately 20 minutes. So it doesn't take that much of your time, and each lesson is dedicated to the different subjects. So I definitely suggest, in case if you want broader, make your picture kind of a broader perspective on basics of the Livonian culture, history, and language. So I strongly suggest that, and these can be found on our institute's YouTube channel. So we have one, as you can see here, and yeah, and there are lots of different interesting stuff like songs in Livonian that you could be capable to sing along. Okay, so this much is now, and I think that now it's a perfect time for question answer sessions, and we continue later on with Livonian resources, but that would be a subject for another lecture later on.